Our first task is going to be to try to deal with the character of Antonio, because he is, after all, the titular hero of the play. Well, he's not actually the hero at all, but he is the person we deal with first, and the person we have to be able to define the best in order to know where we're supposed to go with the rest of the play. So I was interested in seeing some of the reactions that came on your post, your Canvas posts, about what you thought the sources of his sadness were. And I think you're really right in that it is indeterminate, it's hard to figure out, and there are lots of different possibilities. And the ones that came up first, not everybody had responded by the time I recorded this video, were things such as that he's just upset because he's losing his friend, or he's worried about his ships, or that he has financial trouble that is haunting him, or that he may actually have unrequited feelings for Bassanio as well. All of those were really good observations, and I think they do fit into the categories of what it is we need to think about when we evaluate Antonio's sadness. Let's start with that one of his focus on his merchandise, because that's going to be really important to defining several things about Antonio. This is, after all, a play called The Merchant of Venice, and that emphasis on his merchant status is important. Remember that merchant status means something different to an Elizabethan than it means to us. For us, we actually admire businessmen. We tend to do things like, oh, I don't know, elect them president, who knows? And as a result, we don't look at that status as something that is in any way demeaning. But to some degree it is to an Elizabethan. For an Elizabethan, status comes from birth. It comes from the idea of being a member of the aristocracy. And the honest truth is, if you have to work for a living, if you're a merchant, that puts you in a different social class. And that social class is not the one that people necessarily aspire to. For an Elizabethan, social class is not built upon wealth. If it were, Antonio wouldn't have anything to worry about. Instead, social class is dependent upon your status as a gentleman. And that status as a gentleman can't be affected by how much money you have. As a result, you look at somebody like Bassanio, he remains a gentleman even though he's penniless. And for Antonio, well, you know, association with the gentleman class, he's somewhere in between. He's one of those aspiring middle class individuals who just might, in this coming era, be able to progress to a level that could be considered well, not aristocracy, but at least a kind of gentleman. So for Antonio, his friendship with Bassanio is important on a number of levels. It is important because it associates him with a different social class, that upper class, and it also is clearly important for other personal reasons that we'll get into later. So when we start with Antonio, he is there in Act 1, Scene 1, with his friends Slerio and Solanio, who are also merchants. And you will notice that what they talk about primarily is merchandise. And I didn't blame you at all, this was my reaction as well, to think that his sadness could be very easily connected to his financial status. But he does, as some of you pointed out, fervently deny that that's the case. If you look on the top of the second page, you know, he was very explicit as he is about anything, with Slerio and Solanio to say, no, believe me, no, I thank my fortune for it. My ventures are in not one bottom trusted, nor to one place, nor is my whole estate upon the fortune of this present year. Therefore my merchandise makes me not sad. He's very clear, he explains it. But it was interesting that, so far at least, none of you picked up the fact that he's lying. And if you think about it, you'll figure out you have evidence that he's lying. Because if he has ready money, why does he need to borrow money from Shylock in the next scene in order to be able to support Bassanio? So yeah, all of his fortunes are at sea. And yes, he does have something to worry about, because so much of his status is tied to his wealth and his status as a merchant. So yeah, he's got some reason there to be a little worried. The second item that does come to mind is the love issues. And there are a couple of different ways that could work. You know, maybe he's sad that everybody else seems to have a love interest but him. We never see him in the course of this play show anything that indicates he even interacts with a woman, much less that he is in love with one. But we also have that suspicion that he, as Becky said, might be attracted to his friend Bassanio, and that is an unrequited affection. He does talk a great deal about how much he loves Bassanio, and it is indeed possible, given that Bassanio comes to him to talk about how what he wants to do is go marry some rich woman, that is what Antonio has been anticipating, and that he's sad about that. But of course his sadness, though it may be from that unrequited love, could also be out of that uncomfortable recognition that he's going to lose his connection to the upper classes. So again, we don't know for sure, but we do have some measure of suspicion on both of those fronts. And of course it doesn't have to be unrequited love of that sort. It could also simply be a friendship issue, that he's going to feel isolated. He does somehow seem to be a outsider in a number of ways. When his friends Salanio and Salario look at him, they talk about him as a royal merchant, somebody who's a little bit above them. And his connection to somebody like Bassanio means that his friends Salario and Salanio back away from him when Bassanio comes and enters the conversation. And yet when Bassanio talks to him, Bassanio always treats him like he's a merchant, like he's a guy whose importance is mostly in money. If you look at the way Bassanio talks, for instance, about Portia, and about how he wants to go and marry Portia, he lays it out to Antonio as if it's a business proposition. Belmont is a lady richly left, and that what he can do is go get that money. And Antonio has to say, well, I can't really help you. He says, thou knowst that all my fortunes are at sea, precisely the opposite of what he told his other friends. So it's a difficult situation for Antonio here, caught between those two worlds, the mercantile class and his growing friendship with a member of the aristocracy. And when Bassanio treats him like a merchant, Antonio's not happy about it. He says right before that speech by Bassanio that, you are winding about my life with circumstance. You're trying to make this into a business proposition and not a friendship proposition, and he's not happy with that behavior. Another option that you brought up was chronic sadness or depression. Just take him at his word when he says that he can't identify a reason for why he's sad. As a matter of fact, he doesn't feel very happy at any point over the course of this play. If he's sad here at the very beginning when he doesn't really have a clear reason to be, by the time he gets to the end of the play and he's got plenty of reasons to be sad, well, it could just be that confirmation of his actual basic nature. And of course, there's always one other explanation, which is that it's simply a dramatic device, that it sets the tone for the play, because it gives us the sense of looming doom, that it gives us that forbidding atmosphere that gets our attention and makes us wonder about what's going to happen next. The answer? Well, it's one of those conundrums, one of those enduring paradoxes we don't really know for sure. I wrote my master's thesis about it. I think I know. But hey, that's just me. Let's meet again over Bassanio.